Hi all, Steve from TME here. I think this is our first video we've done since we've cleaned up our dyno room. So here it is, nice and clean. Still a little bit of work to do, but looking much better than it used to. Dyno's all nice and clean, new bearings and stuff like that. Still got a little bit to do to the dyno as well, but certainly looking much nicer than it was. The room is just as loud and just as hot as it used to be though, I can guarantee you that. So today I thought I'd do a little bit of a different video. Been asked a couple of times about airflow metering, and I thought I've got a GTR here and it's a bit of a complex situation, so probably the best one to talk about it. So we can have an airflow meter like factories use, and this works really well. Do not underestimate how well an airflow meter works. Airflow meters are amazingly good. If we could put an airflow meter on every single car and it would work properly like a factory does, it would be awesome. However, we can't, so we don't. Now this car looks like it has an airflow meter. You can see one sitting over there and there's another one underneath it buried away in that mess of pipe work that GTRs have when they're still running twin turbos. But it doesn't, it's running a Haltech Elite ECU, so those airflow meters are just there for show. We have on a GTR a little bit of a tricky thing to deal with, and that is that there's 6 butterflies through here. So this manifold here is not exposed to the same pressure as a normal car that has a throttle body down here. So this is a different pressure to the engine because those butterflies in there, unless they're fully open, in which case they're negligible difference. So potentially you could have a situation where you're at say 50% throttle, you can have 10 pounds of boost going into the engine, and you might have say 20 pounds of boost in the plenum. So if we use a manifold pressure sensor like we normally do, and we run that manifold pressure sensor off this plenum here, that's not going to be very accurate because the motor has a very different pressure most of the time to what the plenum sees. So that's not going to work very well at all. Another problem these have is, and this one especially has, is that the temp sensor is still here. The radiator is here with a fan here that blows there. So this all gets really hot from that. Probably less than ideal. I don't really believe it gives you an indicative temperature either. I think the airstream temperature is much lower, and really that sensor would be better located down there. Anyhow, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about airflow metering. So on this, what do? We're not going to use an airflow meter, so we can't just measure the actual air and divide it by the speed of the engine. We're not going to use a manifold pressure sensor because that wouldn't work, because we've got different pressure here to what we have there. So that's no good. Maybe we can use a throttle position sensor, right? So if we use a throttle position sensor on a naturally aspirated car, there's another one here I can show you as well, that has individual throttle bodies and no boost as such, you will get a fairly good relationship between throttle position and the airflow going into the engine. So you can map the fuel requirements based on that. In that situation, we run a barometric pressure sensor as well. So that gives us sort of kind of like a manifold pressure and a TPS as well that overlay the two together, and that kind of works. On this situation though, we have boost as well. So we kind of have to do a few things at once. We need to run a temperature sensor, obviously, because we need to know the air temperature to know the density. We run a manifold pressure sensor off this plenum here, but that's not going to work. We run a throttle position sensor off this throttle position shaft over here, but again, that's not going to work either. So what we do is we map throttle position versus engine RPM first as a 3D map. We do that first, and then we overlay with that a target AFR table based on this manifold pressure. So what that means is if we're at say 50% throttle and 0 boost, we might want say lambda 90. If we wanted at 15 pounds of boost, we might, let's say, lambda 80. Therefore we can put a target AFR that says, okay, at 0 boost we want 90, and at 15 pounds of boost we want 80, therefore add 12% extra fuel or whatever it is. So we do that, and that's pretty close and it's pretty good, especially when overlaid with some temperature correction based on this temp sensor down here. That would respond differently to most sensors that are located more like down in that pipe there. Again, argument for another day. So it almost works. We just have one more overlay, and that is RPM versus manifold pressure compensation. So we just have a little bit of a correction going on as well, which means our AFR target table can look exactly like we want it to look like, and then we can just make adjustments to our tune to make it match that target AFR table for every cell. Works fairly well, quite complicated. I'm sure an airflow meter could actually work better, but it works fairly well, and that's how most GTRs are done, and that's about the most complex type of airflow metering you're likely to see. Mostly you will see a manifold pressure sensor on an aftermarket ECU, or a throttle position sensor for something like an NA quad throttle body or 6 throttle body, 8 throttle body engine. But then on this you have boost overlaid over the top. So yeah, that's just a bit of airflow metering talk. Hope you enjoyed it. See you soon.